Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Make You Known podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today, our guest is a writer, a speaker, wife to one husband, and mother to two teenage children. So hats off for that. She is also the author of a book called Extraordinary Hospitality for Ordinary People. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mrs. Carolyn Lacey. You can find Carolyn online on Twitter at Lacey, that's Lacey _Carolyn. And she's also got a blog which has got a link from there. So Carolyn, thank you so much for joining us today. So you've written this book, Extraordinary Hospitality for Ordinary People. Thank you very much for writing it. I found it very helpful, and actually one of the things I did like about it as well is that it was concise and to the point. I know that some people, I feel like some authors sometimes add like 100 pages to a book to for an ego trip or whatever. I like the fact that it was punchy and to the point. So thanks for writing that. Could you just tell us a little bit about the book, how it came about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So the book really came about because I was teaching with my husband at a conference for young people who were thinking about going into full-time Christian ministry. And for my part, I was teaching through the characteristics of a church leader or an elder, one of which is that he must be hospitable. And it kind of occurred to me that in most of the churches and spaces that I've been involved in, that has been loosely translated as his wife, if he has one, must be good at having lots of people around for dinner. And I do think that the Apostle Paul probably meant more than just that. And then at the same time, I found myself in conversations with quite a few friends who were struggling with this traditional idea of hospitality for a variety of reasons. Some because their living circumstances made it difficult to have people in the home. Maybe they were lodging or in shared spaces or living with unbelieving family members and just finding that difficult. But others who were struggling with mental health issues like anxiety or depression, and the idea of inviting people into their home and cooking for them was just too overwhelming. But they were feeling guilty about that. And so really I wanted to just think more deeply about hospitality and see if we could not find a broader definition or model of what it means to be hospitable. And so basically I just started tracking through the Bible, starting in Genesis and working through what God's hospitality looks like, how he has shown welcome to us, and then really thought about how that can inform the way we welcome others. And so that's kind of where we ended up with 7 ways to welcome like Jesus. So it was really looking at characteristics of welcome that we see in him, delighting in them, and then thinking, okay, how can I learn to welcome other people like that?
No, that's really cool. So I noticed, like at the start, one of the things I really like you say around page 24, I'll just actually read the quote because I thought it was good. You say that Jesus offers grace to us, but he also offers grace to others through us. He promises that living water will flow from within us to others. That is, he will extend his welcome to others through us. This is the best motivation for offering generous hospitality. Generosity is not just something we are called to do, an item to tick on the spirituality checklist. It is a significant way in which God works in our lives to bring life to others. And I really like that because I think like it's that's so important, isn't it? It's having it that way round, that it's not something we do as a kind of like, oh, here we go. This is the next on my onerous list. But it's something that comes from, oh, actually, I'm excited to do this as part of my kind of mission.
Yeah, and I think just that, and it should be more of a natural response to what God has done for us, and so that's partly why you'll have seen throughout the book, as well as being practical about how we show hospitality, I've really wanted to excite the reader about the wonderful way in which God has welcomed us, because really our welcome of others should spring from that. It should be the natural overflow of hearts that are just really grateful for what he's done and excited and also want to share his wonderful welcome with others. So yeah, that's kind of where I was coming from with that, really.
Yeah, no, that's great. So one of the things you say, which I'll just contend for a second, is on page 25, you say, while our unbelieving friends or work colleagues may use their homes, their money, and their ability to impress, we want to use ours to bless. I think that's really true, but I also think there's it's not necessarily a secular, sacred divide in terms of, I think there's plenty of Christians who kind of like to have their homes as a bit of a show home and and all that kind of stuff. Would you agree with that? Or
yeah, I do. And I think, I mean, obviously, because of common grace, there are unbelievers who use their time, their talents, their homes in wonderfully generous ways. And there can be Christians who don't. And I think what I'm kind of pushing into is that our Western culture is very focused on being impressive, earning approval, gaining status, and how easily really we've absorbed that into Christian culture and into the church. And so the gifts that we have from God, we can often, even without realizing it, use them to kind of build our own kingdoms, to impress people, or to make ourselves feel good, or that we've arrived, And so I'm kind of trying to press into that and saying, for the most part, that can be how society works, but we are called to be different. And of course, there are Christians who are wonderfully different, but it is really a way that we can be countercultural, isn't it? And just be really mindful that what we have isn't to terminate with us. It's all to be used to bless others, really. But you're right, of course, you can't really draw the line directly between the Christian and the non-Christian, because there are people from all walks of life who are wonderfully generous and wonderfully giving. And that's a challenge to us, really, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I agree. And one of the things I sort of like that you kind of illustrate, which is I sort of hadn't really thought of before myself, was about this idea of hospitality not necessarily being about having people in for dinner. Like, there are other ways to express it. And could you just briefly outline a couple of those?
Yeah, and so what I've tried to do is think about hospitality as welcome. Now, if you think about it, Jesus was the perfect human, which means he must have been hospitable, but he didn't have his own home. And so I've found it really helpful to look at just some of the different ways that Jesus has shown welcome to people in his earthly life and ministry. Sometimes that was inviting himself to others' homes to eat with them. But sometimes it was stopping to speak with people on the street, or by a well, or in the temple courts or the synagogues, and calling people to come to him there. And so I've just wanted to think, especially for those for whom it's a genuine struggle to invite people into the home, what are some of the other ways in which we can be welcoming? And so in the workplace, for example, most people don't go to work thinking, how can I show hospitality today? But I wonder if we could. I wonder if we could think, how can I communicate to my colleagues or to the people that I meet in the workplace that they're wanted and that they're welcome in my life. I might not invite all of them back to my home, but I can show that they're welcome in my life. I can give them my time. I can work hard to find out about their families or their interests or struggles that they have. I can offer to eat lunch or go for a walk or grab a coffee. And so I was just trying to encourage people to think, okay, in the workplace, what would it look like for me to communicate to the people that I meet and work among? You are welcome in my life and you're wanted. And similarly in the community or with our neighbours. I mean, it's great if you're able to have neighbours in. That's a lovely way to kind of firm up friendship. But actually, just by our interactions in the street, in the supermarket, we can communicate whether or not we really value and welcome people, and the same, I suppose, within the church family. So yeah, I'm just trying to get us to think a bit more broadly, and I think that could be especially helpful for those who for genuine reasons can't have people in the home. I don't want to give us a pass. Like, I don't think we want to make our homes places into which we retreat and don't share if we're able to. But for those for whom hospitality in the home really is difficult, it's very freeing to know, well, I can do it elsewhere.
Yeah, I think that's really great. It makes sense on a level. I love that idea of welcome that you kind of portray there. What do you think, like, if you are someone who is introverted and kind of anxious, like, it's going to be a much bigger ask than for someone who's obviously very sociable and extroverted or whatever. What do you think they should do?
Well, one of the wonderful things about being a Christian is that we belong to a family. And so I wonder if one thing is to get the family to help. So don't think of hospitality as a kind of solo sport. You know, it's something that we can do together. And so I think if you're feeling anxious or if you're feeling shy, get a friend from church just to help you, and start small. Don't overburden yourself. So it might be on a Sunday at the end of a service, arrange that with a friend you're going to get a coffee and try and strike up a conversation with someone who's on their own, and use your friend to help you. Or if you're wanting to meet up outside of church, start small, go for a walk or go for a coffee, but again, bring a friend to help you. I've actually got a Japanese friend, and her English isn't great. It's better than she thinks it is, but she gets quite nervous about being on her own with me in case she can't carry the conversation. So she always just brings another Japanese friend with her whenever we meet. And I don't think that's strange at all. And so I think if you need to do that, that's perhaps a good place to start. Get the family to help.
Yeah, I think that's great. The baby steps, and that's with so many things, isn't it? And because I don't know about you, but I found, like, I've got very limited experience of hospitality, but like generally I enjoy, like, meeting people and talking to people and all the rest of it. But there's actually something kind of vulnerable about having someone into your home, and I've often found myself actually kind of nervous about the whole experience, like before it happens, about like, what if I mess up the dinner, or what if the conversation just dies off and I don't know what to say. I don't know, have you ever had any of that? Or
Yeah, and I mean, by nature, I love people. I wouldn't be in ministry if I didn't, but I am an introvert, and I worry about kind of running out of steam, energy-wise, and what if it's going to be a really, really long night and I don't know how to kind of wrap things up, and I kind of think it's never as tricky as I think it's going to be. But the worst that can happen is that conversation is a bit stilted, and even in those cases, I think most people appreciate efforts. Even if things don't go smoothly, if the food's not fantastic or conversation's a bit stilted, I think most people can tell whether we're genuine in wanting to show care towards them, and I think do appreciate that. And it's interesting, I was chatting to a friend a few weeks ago, and she is brilliant at cooking for loads of people. She's always had stacks of people in the house, and she was saying that actually after this year of restrictions and lockdown, she's feeling quite nervous and anxious about kind of starting that again. And I think probably a lot of people are. So this feels like quite a nice opportunity, really, to reset and acknowledge that we're all a bit nervous and we're all a bit out of practice, and we'll just start small and see what happens. And one practical thing we sometimes do is if there are people that I don't know very well, or I'm not quite sure how it might go, we might invite people to come for dinner before prayer meeting or before small group. So it's not for a whole night. It's just an hour or so, and it's just a kind of first steps opportunity to get to know them. So that can be something helpful as well.
Yeah, I think that's good to have like a sort of healthy kind of almost put a margin on it or a time window on it. And what you say about the food thing is interesting as well. I think I think sometimes we mix up hospitality and entertainment, don't we? And we kind of feel like we have to put on Belshazzar's feast or something like that, don't we? And it's like, like, do you know what? It's actually, you can serve your guests a ready meal. Like if it's between that and not having them in at all, that's okay. Do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And pizza. Like my kids, when people have dropped pizzas around for us, my kids think that's the biggest treat. So shop bought pizzas are fine, or shop bought soup and rolls. It's fine. And in some ways, it might take the pressure off as well, because I think sometimes guests can be a bit nervous, can't they? And if you've gone all out, there's almost a bit of pressure on them to hold up their end of the conversation, or for them to be entertaining as well. So sometimes I think simple makes everybody feel a bit more relaxed.
Yeah, totally agree. I totally agree. So you also talk a little bit about, or you mention at a given point, time management, like diary management and all that kind of thing. And I just kind of wanted to highlight that because I feel like that's actually a really important thing, and that's something that we don't often think about or talk about. Like we manage a diary for our works or all that kind of stuff, but when it comes to hospitality, I think there's something to be said around all that stuff of actually booking things in and like sort of guarding time and having margin in life for that kind of thing. So do you how do you go about managing, like in a non-COVID kind of world? How would you? I mean, are you structured about it, or do you kind of just leave enough room that you can be spontaneous? Or
well, sometimes I do it really badly, and I, like everybody else, completely over cram life, and I'm far too ambitious about what can happen in a week. But I've learnt over the last couple of years to try where I can to leave margin, and it's not always possible. And sometimes there are seasons that are just very busy and very pressured, and we have to just go with that, and there's grace for that. But I do wonder, particularly in the West, if sometimes we choose busy, and maybe just because we're not thoughtful or intentional about things, we make our plans, whatever it is, sports or other hobbies, or kind of just saying yes to things without thinking about it, and then find that we haven't got any margin, so that when a neighbour stops you in the street, you're kind of stressed, I've actually got to get home in 5 minutes and be out the door. And so I am trying quite hard generally to be thoughtful about that. So my husband and I at the beginning of the week tend to do diaries, sometimes at the beginning of a fortnight or a month, and just work out where are the busy pressure points and where is there a bit of slack. And I'm trying not to fill up every slot, so that if my neighbour does knock and she wants to chat, that's fine. Or if I'm busy, I can say, I'm not free now, but can we catch up on Saturday morning? So I think we can't always help when busy gets us, but I think we can sometimes choose not to pursue busyness. There are a variety. I don't know what you think about this, Jason. I think there are a variety of reasons as well why we make ourselves busy. Sometimes it's for feeling fulfilled, or that we're achieving enough, or that life's full and exciting enough. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a massive, a really interesting topic and a massive thing in our time, isn't it? And there's just sometimes it's just negligence. Like I can't remember where I read it, but I remember somewhere it's saying about busyness almost being laziness, because what it means is like you have just not bothered to carefully plan your diary. Which I just thought that was so interesting. And sometimes I think we just fill life up because we don't want to deal with just dealing with ourselves. Sometimes it's almost like this filler activity of just kind of, if I can be frenzied, then I won't realize I'm lonely, or or something like that. And that's one of the really interesting things around this whole COVID situation, and how that's kind of forced us to deal with certain things. But there's also, I mean, I remember reading a book by Kevin DeYoung called Crazy Busy, which was quite good. And one of the interesting things that I just didn't think about before I read it was, he talked about pride being a massive part of it, and how it's, there's so much around being seen to be busy and not being able to say no and all the rest of it. And funny enough, that I was interested that it comes into your book as well, actually, that there's the two types of pride that can prevent hospitality. You can sort of be, oh, I'm above that person or whatever, or you kind of worry too much about what others think. Is that correct? Yeah. So what's your thoughts on pride and hospitality and all of that?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's the biggest obstacle, really. I think there's the obvious pride, like you were just saying, that I might think myself above certain people. I might be a bit choosy about who I want to make space for in my life. And that's quite obvious. And we would all say, oh no, that's wrong, we shouldn't do that. But then the subtle form of pride is really our desire for approval. And that's where this whole fear of what people might think comes in. So, you said earlier, there's a vulnerability about inviting people into our homes. They might see that we've not quite got it all together. There's a vulnerability in cooking for people, or hosting. They might see that I'm not as skilled as they thought, or I'm not as good at conversation as other people who they might spend time with. And all of these fears can seem like quite good excuses for not offering welcome, but actually they all stem from fear of man, which is a form of pride. And so I do think it is the biggest obstacle. And I talked about that quite a bit in the book, because I don't think we always identify it as an enemy, as an obstacle in that way. But it does affect everything. And I do think if you want to be a welcoming person, that does take quite a degree of vulnerability, and that's humbling, really, isn't it?
Yeah. It's so interesting how so many things kind of come back to those kind of words like vulnerability and all this kind of stuff, which are things we have to learn. And I think they're things I'm hearing around more, which is great. So I feel like things are moving, but again, it's one of those things that it might be nice to talk about, but then the actual doing it takes some kind of bravery, right, and kind of willingness to put ourselves a bit on the line, which is a good thing. I think we need to encourage one another to step out a little bit more, and I mean, what have we got to lose, really, to some extent? So just before we move on to the quickfire stuff, have you got any like personal stories or whatever of where hospitality you've seen kind of transformation or kind of fruit born through all of that?
I'll share a story. I mentioned this briefly in the book. I didn't quite go into a lot of detail because I'm a bit worried that my friend will read it and identify herself. But years ago, there was a woman that I met at the school gate, and she was really cold to me, and I couldn't work out why. We all stood with the same group of parents. Our girls were all friends, and she was quite hostile to me. And it turned out that she hates Christians, for various reasons. And I did pray about it quite a lot. I felt like I should pursue her and pursue a relationship with her, which I did, and invited her round, invited her kids round to play or to go to the park with mine. And it was quite hard work quite often, and quite a few times I had her round for meals with other mums from the school gate, and I kind of never knew which version of her might arrive. She might be okay, or she might be a bit cold. But anyway, I just persevered, and I don't think I did anything particularly special except just tried to be warm, tried to be kind, tried to include her, even though honestly it would have been easier not to at times. Anyway, probably about 3 years in, she just turned up on my doorstep one night and invited herself in, and her marriage was falling apart, and she just said, I just thought you would be compassionate and understanding because you're a Christian and you've always been kind to me. And it was wonderful, really. And we're very close now. We see each other all the time. And funnily, we were talking probably a few months ago now. And she said she wouldn't describe herself as an atheist now. She thinks God's probably real because she sees the impact in my life, but he's not for her. And I thought, that's amazing, really. That's just an extraordinary way that God has worked in her heart through quite simple and low-key but persistent taking of opportunities to welcome her. And I don't think I'm particularly great at that. And I've always been a bit scared of her as well. So that was a big encouragement to me, I guess.
Yeah, well, hats off for that, because I must say that persistence thing is probably one of the most challenging to me personally. I mean, if I know someone's not keen on me, I tend to just keep away from them, let alone trying again and again to, draw near. But you're right, that is the reflection. Like, that is the sort of template we've been given of all the love that's shown to us is persistent, isn't it? And so I was challenged when reading that, but that's great to hear. And well done for that. I trust that, and I love that as well, that it's part of a process, right? It's like we sometimes expect we have to take someone from here to there in like a heartbeat, and it's like that's not what it's about. It's not going to happen over one dinner, is it? Well, it might, but it's more likely it's a process of doing life with people, right? And
again, I do think because generally people are busy and they don't make time to persevere with those who are hard work. I think that it's another way that we can just be a little bit different. I think probably most of our non-Christian friends and neighbours are used to people just kind of giving up on them if it's not going very well, or if they're feeling offended or hurt or whatever it is. So again, it's another way that we can show that we're different because of the way that God has treated us.
Yeah. No, I think that's really good. Different is an interesting word as well. That just reminds me briefly of a Tim Keller talk I listened to where he talks about us being salt. And anyway, it's probably a bit of a big side avenue to go into now, but he did say, one of the things is like how is, because I think he was addressing sort of a secular audience on what use is Christianity in culture today, and he was basically like, well, we're called to be salt, and one thing salt does is it brings flavour, and it can't bring flavour if it's the same as the thing it's bringing flavour to. Like you don't add meat to meat to make it taste better. You add salt, And I thought that was a really good analogy of we have to be that salt, that kind of. So just moving on to the quick fire questions then. What one thing do you know now that you wish you'd known as a 20-year-old?
So many things, but I'm going to say this. I wish I'd have known how dependent I needed to be on God's grace every day, and also that his grace would be sufficient every day. I wish I'd have been humble enough to see my need to depend on him more.
That's great. I don't think we can get beyond that, can we, to some extent? Like, gospel in 1 minute, or less, or more.
Or less. God has clothed himself in flesh and bones and has come to rescue people who could not rescue themselves, people who are hopelessly lost and unaware of it. And he has come into our world and saved us. And through his death on the cross and his triumph over death, he has made it possible for us to have life.
Love it. How do you keep going through discouragement / dark night of the soul?
I think Bible reading is the key. The more time I spend in the Word, the more I'm equipped to persevere. And when I'm tempted to neglect God's word is when everything gets a little bit too overwhelming. So being in the word, memorizing the word as well, so it's just there when I need to recall it. That's been the main thing, I would say.
Nice. Any recommendations for books or podcasts or the like, even social media accounts that you find are good to engage with, helpful?
There's a podcast that I really enjoy listening to. It's called The Way Home, and the host is Daniel Darling, who wrote The Dignity Revolution. And what I really like about it is he'll have a variety of guests on, often people who've written books or have got expertise in a certain area, a lot of ethical issues, and thinking about how Christians can dialogue with and engage with ethical issues. And I find that really stimulating. It's The Way Home. Books, well, I'll recommend a book which some people might not have come across. It's called Practices of Love for the Life. Yeah, Practices of Love is what it's called. And it's by Carl David Bennett. And it's the premise is that we often think spiritual disciplines are about me and God. I do these things to be closer to God. But he's saying, what if our spiritual disciplines are good for the life of the world? And I've had that in my mind a bit as I've been thinking about hospitality. So yeah, I'd recommend that, Practices of Love by Kyle David Bennett.
Nice. They both sound really good, actually. I will make a point of following up with both of those. And finally, if you could send one kind of tweet-sized message to young adults today, what would it say?
Nothing and no one in this world can bear the weight of your hopes and dreams and desires and longings. Only Christ can. So run to him.
Fantastic. Carolyn, any last thoughts before we wrap up?
Well, I just want to encourage people to spend some time delighting in what God has done for us in the Lord Jesus, and reflecting on how welcoming he's been. We have a God who is so incredibly generous to us, more generous than we realise. He's offered us welcome that is undeserved and that is overwhelming and that lasts into eternity. And so I would encourage people to spend some time dwelling on that, and then let that inform the way we welcome others. If our motivation isn't right, or and we're just trying to kind of do things because it seems like something we probably should do, we'll get overwhelmed and overburdened again, or just fed up with it, and we'll give up. But if we can keep in mind what God has done for us in the Lord Jesus, and just that eternal perspective as well, he has welcomed us in a way that will last into eternity, and our welcome is a way that we can reflect that and share it with others, and we can do so hopefully, prayerfully, anticipating that we also might bear fruit that lasts into eternity. Yeah,
I'm not going to add anything to that because I think that's a great kind of. I'm not sure I could actually. That's why. So it's a great way to end. So thank you so much for your time, Carolyn. And
it's been great to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Take care. Well, listeners, I hope you found that conversation was inspiring, and hopefully that will spur you on a bit and motivate you in your hospitality and your welcome. Think about it. Who is it in your life that you can maybe draw near to, that you can welcome into your life, grab a coffee with, have them around for a bit of food, whatever it is. Let's not overcomplicate it. Let's just open our lives to the people around us, and those particularly who might be in need. In the meantime, this is the book Extraordinary Hospitality for Ordinary People by Carolyn Lacey. we actually have a copy to give away. So check out the social medias. That's probably where you're most likely to find there will be a link to where you can get a hold of this for gratis. Don't forget, if you haven't already, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, or you can follow us on social media. We are on Instagram at make_you_known and on Facebook as MakeYouKnown, all one word. Until next time, take care.